want to build a membership site, and if you're watching this video, you're probably trying to decide between two options: WordPress and Webflow. And maybe you want to build an online course, maybe you want to build a job board, whatever you want to build, it doesn't matter. If you haven't used either Webflow or WordPress before and you just want to learn about the differences in the two tools, click the link in the top right for our video where we break down the complete differences between WordPress and Webflow. Now, if you're looking to build a membership site, then stick around because I'm going to break down in this video the difference between using WordPress and using Webflow to build one. First things first, let's talk about pricing and specifically what it's going to cost you to run a membership site with Webflow. So first things first, Webflow's pricing is like totally confusing. Everyone thinks that, and I think it takes a scientist to break it down. If you want to see a video specifically where I break down Webflow pricing from top to bottom, please comment so below. So I don't have time in this video to go through all of it. That being said, you can expect to be paying Webflow about $30 a month, and it can go up as you scale. But for a brand new membership site, you can expect to pay $30 a month to Webflow. That being said, Webflow isn't everything that you actually need to run a membership site. Webflow did have a native user account system, but they sunsetted that in favor of focusing on the designer. So if you do want to build a membership site with Webflow, you are going to need some sort of third-party app such as MemberStack. I use MemberStack personally, and I did even while Webflow user accounts was a thing, because I really like the scalability. With MemberStack, everything is done for you right out of the box. It doesn't take long to set up at all, and you can scale with it to millions of members. That being said, everything comes at a cost. So you are gonna need to pay an additional, starting at $29 a month for MemberStack, which should be good for all basic membership sites. So with all things said and done, taking a look at your hosting bill and the third-party app you're gonna need to make it happen, you can expect to pay about $60 to $80 US every single month to operate your Webflow membership site. Now to get into WordPress, and one thing that you probably already know about WordPress is that it is free. It is an open source CMS, so you won't actually need to pay WordPress anything to operate your membership site. That being said, if you have ever operated a WordPress site before, then you probably know that running a WordPress site is anything but free. At the end of the day, there are still things that you're probably either A, gonna need to pay for, or B, do the work yourself to set up and run your site. So like I said, while WordPress itself is free, what are you going to need in order to actually get your site up and running? First things first, you are going to need to host that site. Webflow handles hosting for you. WordPress does not handle hosting for you. Now, WordPress hosting can be very cheap. I've seen WordPress hosting for as little as $2 a month. That being said, it can go up. So it all really depends on how many users you have, how heavy your site is, and all of that fun stuff. That being said, for hosting, you can expect for a brand new site to probably pay between $6 and $10 every month to host your WordPress site. So it's not all that bad. Now, along with that, WordPress does have a native user system. You don't need any third-party thing like MemberStack to build a membership site with WordPress. That being said, a lot of people opt to use one anyways because there's an issue which we'll get a bit more into later, which is scalability with the native WordPress user system. So even if you are using a third-party plugin to keep things all streamlined, then you can expect to spend between $30 and $50 a month to host your WordPress membership site. So while it is cheaper than Webflow, I'm actually gonna give the price category winner to Webflow. And the reason I'm gonna do that is because WordPress sites need to be maintained and they need to be updated. You are more than likely going to need to spend, by the absolute minimum, 1 hour a month on simply maintaining your WordPress site, on fixing things that may have broken when certain plugins updated, when WordPress updated. So at the end of the day, it's probably going to cost you a little bit more to operate your WordPress site than it would to operate your Webflow site. But it can be really, really different depending on the case. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about when it comes to building membership sites is scalability. So both WordPress and Webflow can be extremely scalable and can carry you well into the millions of members. The platforms themselves don't really stop you from scaling, which is really great. That being said, there are some scaling issues that you're going to run into with one versus the other, and this is actually probably where the two platforms differ the most. Because, to talk about Webflow first, Webflow's infrastructure is rock solid, and you paying them that $30 a month basically has them manage all of that infrastructure and has it so things aren't going to break. Now, if you do get a whole bunch of users, a whole bunch of visitors, expect your monthly bill to be a lot more than $30. That being said, you can probably afford it if you have all of those visitors. Now, the scaling issues with Webflow that I have seen, now I have been a freelancer and agency owner, and now I actually work for MemberStack. So I've seen a lot of people build membership sites with Webflow. Not to mention, I've built a ton of them myself. So what do I see that causes problems with scaling more than anything when you're building a Webflow site? That is platform limitations. So as we know now, Webflow is not open source. You pay Webflow, they manage everything for you. On the bright side, that means you have a lot less to manage. There's a lot less that can break. There's a lot less that you need to pay developers. On the dark side, you're going to run into things that you just cannot do with Webflow. So you have no control over your server with Webflow, unlike with WordPress. So I've seen lots of situations where people build a membership site, all is good, and then they want to add, let's say, certain server files, and they can't do it because Webflow doesn't allow it. Along with that, Webflow has a static page limit of, I believe right now, 150 static pages. And if I'm not wrong, I want to say 20,000 CMS items, and you could buy extras. So Webflow has its own scaling problems. That being said, you don't really need to worry about your site breaking. More or less what you have to be scared of is not being able to implement new features that you may have thought about at a later date. So my advice to anyone building a membership site with Webflow is very, very clearly plan out at the start how you're going to implement every single feature that you want on the site. And along with that, try to think of any features that you may want down the road and how you would implement those. Because you may get into a situation where you're banging your head on the desk, wishing you just started with WordPress from day one. So if you plan out everything good and your use case doesn't need you to edit your server files or anything, then you might be way better off and way more comfortable running a Webflow membership site. So now that we've talked about Webflow's platform limitations, and if that is kind of scaring you, I have some really great news, because now we're talking about WordPress. And my favorite thing about WordPress, as someone who's been using Webflow every day for years, is how limitless it is. You have total ownership of everything on your site. All of the code on your site, it's yours, you own it. You can change it. Even if a certain plugin isn't working your way, you can edit the plugin's code. So you have total flexibility and also total scalability when it comes to implementing new features down the road. That being said, it's not all sunshine and unicorns in the WordPressville, because that full customizability and full control does not come at a low price point. Since you have control over everything, you also have to manage everything. And especially as you start to scale, you can run into some really big issues with certain things breaking, with your hosting, and especially if you are using the native WordPress user system. I've heard some horror stories from people who essentially had to spend hours a day simply optimizing their database to make it so their site wasn't super slow because they had hundreds of thousands of members. Now, again, you can circumvent that by using a third-party plugin such as MemberStack, so you can kind of choose your own adventure there. That being said, you need to think long and hard about what matters more to you: ease of running your site or flexibility of improving your site, let's say, down the road. That is the big deciding factor when it comes to scalability. Now, it's really hard for me to pick a winner in the scalability department. That being said, I am going to pick WordPress simply because you won't run into these limitations. You may run into problems and headaches and slow sites and all of that stuff, but you're not gonna just be hitting a brick wall with WordPress, which I really, really love. And so the next thing that I wanna talk about is tools that you need. So obviously you're gonna need either Webflow or WordPress, but what else do you need in order to run your membership site? So the great thing about Webflow is that it kind of gives you everything you need out of the box to run a site. not a membership site. So while Webflow handles your hosting, it handles your page builder, your designer, whatever you want to call it, and it handles a lot of those things for you, it doesn't handle allowing people to log in. So you are going to need to get some sort of third-party tool in order to enable those logins. And my recommendation, of course, would be MemberStack. It is the most trusted and the one that's been around the longest in the Webflow community. There's a whole bunch of documentation, a community of over 6,000 people. I would strongly recommend MemberStack if you're building a membership site. Now, MemberStack may be the only thing you need. It also may not be the only thing you need. If all you're trying to do is allow payments, gate content, and you kind of have everything taking place on your site, then MemberStack is probably going to be all you need. But if you're trying to send data between different things, let's say you're trying to have it so when one of your members fills out a form, it adds a Webflow CMS item. Perhaps that's a job post, perhaps that's a question on a course, whatever that may be, doesn't matter. You are going to need something to move that data around. And if it's simple and kind of one-off cases, I would recommend using make.com, formerly known as Integromat. It is a really great, really affordable automation tool. You don't need to know how to code. It's just really, really good right out of the box. I use it all the time, still to this day. So I would definitely recommend Make. Now, if you need to have, you're building like a web app, there's a lot of stuff taking place. You're sending data from the user into your Webflow site, into your database, into MemberStack, into like 80 different things. Whatever it is, you're building something complicated. My recommendation to you is Wized, that is W-I-Z-E-D. Wized is a really, really cool tool that kind of like opens the floodgates with Webflow. If you're using Wized, you can build almost anything. Last year, I actually built a full SaaS application, whatsalltherage.com, shameless little promo there. And I used just Webflow, Wized, and MemberStack. It is amazing the things that you can do with that stack. That being said, you are either going to need to know how to code or be able to work with some sort of AI, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, whatever you use, because there is still coding needed in Wized. So just to recap that part right there, obviously you need Webflow, you're probably going to need MemberStack, and you may need either Make or Wized, or even both. Now we have WordPress, and something a lot of people complain about with WordPress is the amount of different tools that they really need. Now I think that's a little bit exaggerated sometimes. I don't really think you need all that many plugins to run most WordPress sites, even membership sites. But you are going to need a couple, and I would say probably a couple more than you would need with Webflow. First things first, you're going to need a builder. You're going to need some way to build your pages, and the most popular builder out there is called Elementor. Elementor is great. That being said, I was specifically a Webflow developer for well near 7 years of my life, and I really got used to that style of building sites. So when I went back over to WordPress to try it out a bit and I discovered Bricks Builder, I fell in love. Using WordPress with Bricks Builder is now one of my favorite ways to build a site. It's a very similar experience to Webflow in the sense that you don't need to code, but you get advanced customization options, however many you like. So I would strongly recommend Bricks Builder, but the community consensus is that Elementor is still the king. Whatever you pick, you are going to need some sort of page builder. The next thing you got to think about is users and how you're going to allow that. Like I said, for a lot of sites, you're just going to be able to use the native WordPress user system. If that's the case, you don't need to pay anything else. It's actually not an additional tool, it's included. But like I've said so many times in this video, you could run into some issues with that. So again, I'm used to using MemberStack, so I also use the MemberStack plugin for WordPress, which gives you all the same benefits it gives you in Webflow. You can allow people to sign up, log in, social auth like Google, Facebook, LinkedIn. You can gate content. There are a lot of things that you can do with MemberStack. It's super easy to set up and it does everything that I need it to do. And I don't need to worry about scalability with it, so I use MemberStack on both my WordPress and on my Webflow sites. The next category here that I want to talk about is CMS. What are you going to need to make your CMS work in WordPress? And if you haven't used WordPress all that much, you're probably looking at me and going, isn't WordPress a CMS? What more could I possibly need? Well, WordPress is a really great framework, but it doesn't give you everything that you need right out of the box. I find every single WordPress site that I make requires a plugin called ACF or Advanced Custom Fields. That allows me to create new custom post types, new custom fields, add those and organize those all without using code. The free tier works beautifully for me, and it's something I use on pretty much every single site. The next category of tools here is plugins, or well, they're all plugins. The next thing that I want to talk about here is tools that you can use for backup. So if you are not always backing up your WordPress site, you are crazy. Start doing it now, because like I said, things can just break and go wrong on a WordPress site without you having done anything. So storing backups is absolutely crucial. And again, what I use to store backups and do site transfers is a plugin called WP Vivid. I've been using the free tier. It's been perfectly fine for me, doing everything that I need it to do. But whatever you use, make sure you're backing up that site. And finally, we've got my hosting recommendations. So when I was first getting back into WordPress, I was recommended WPMU DEV. That should be written right here where my face is, because you might not remember that. Really great tool, really great UI. It has a bunch of features. There's hosting options from $4 a month all the way well into the thousands of dollars a month. So it has everything you need. It's a very nice modern experience. So I love it, and I think you're gonna love it too. So I use both of these tools, WordPress and Webflow, every single day. I love both of them, and they serve me different needs. I can't sit here and tell you one or the other is better for building a membership site, but what I can tell you is if you're going for ultimate flexibility and never hitting brick walls, go for WordPress. If you're going for something more streamlined, easy to manage, and you'll run into less headaches, go for Webflow. I hope this helps you out. See you in the next one.